which is on ArchiveSpace for Reference with Missy Nerino of the Industrial Archives and Brittany Newberry of the Atlanta University Center, and they are going to introduce themselves. So take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending our presentation. So today we'll be discussing how ArchiveSpace can be used to help with reference. I'm Brittany Newberry. I'm a processing archivist at the Atlanta University Center. At the AUC, I train staff, interns, and volunteers on using ArchiveSpace, and I create and update our ArchiveSpace manuals. I am an active member of the Society of American Archivists, as well as a member of the Archivists and Archives of Color section and membership committee of SAA. I also serve as the Assistant Communications Director for the Society of Georgia Archivists, and I am currently the Vice Chair for the ArchiveSpace User Advisory Council, lead for the testing sub-team, and an ArchiveSpace trainer.
And hi, I'm Missy Nerino. I'm the Associate Archivist and Librarian at the Industrial Archives and Library in Bethlehem, PA. I was a part of the working group for the 2020 ArchiveSpace Online Forum. I'm an active member of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Archives Conference, and I'm a member of the Communications Committee. I also currently am serving as the Associate Editor and the outgoing Advertisement Editor for Mid-Atlantic Archivist, our quarterly publication. Before we get started, just a quick housekeeping. We will have a link with some resources available at the end of this, but if you miss it, it will be available after the recording becomes available at the end of the forum, or a week or so after that. All right, let's get started.
Okay, so today we are hoping that you leave this presentation with a better understanding of how and what you can do for reference when using ArchiveSpace. Our main objectives are to provide ways for you to teach researchers how to use the ArchiveSpace public user interface, give ways in which you as archivists can use ArchiveSpace for reference, and give examples of resources that can help you and your researchers.
So today's archival researcher is different than the past. A lot of people utilizing archives are not professional researchers. They're not used to combing through finding aids to find what they want. Instead, they come with that Google mentality. They will expect to be able to put in a word or a phrase and have the results come up instantly. Additionally, our researchers today want to be autonomous. They don't want the archivist acting as gatekeeper. And this is often compounded with the expectation that many materials should be digitized for easy viewing in their browser. So how do we meet the researchers halfway? Fortunately, ArchiveSpace is intuitive enough that we can help resolve this problem. A twofold approach might be the most suitable. On one side, we need to communicate with our users and help them to understand both archives as well as how ArchiveSpace works. And we should show them the public user interface. On the other hand, archivists can take intermittent steps to make sure archival materials are findable to those who wish to use it, and maximizing ArchiveSpace's capabilities can help with that. There's no single way to process a collection. I think we all know that. Nor is there one way to use ArchiveSpace. We just saw with UNC how they were utilizing it for their accession records and then phasing into the finding aids. So this session is not a one-size-fits-all solution. But taking time to ask yourself a few questions will be able to help you hone in on what you need. First, you want to think about your average researcher if you have one. Is it an undergraduate student? Is it a genealogist? Or do you just have people coming in off the street? You want to think about their experience level in dealing with archives. An experienced historian most likely knows how to read a finding aid, while the undergraduate student doesn't. You also want to think about what the researcher wants out of their sessions. Are they just looking for a single image to add to a presentation, or would they like to sit and read through all the correspondence of one person over 50 years? And finally, you want to think about how much they are willing to invest. A researcher who plans on coming into the archives for days or weeks on end will be happy investing a half hour to learn about your collections and your public user interface. But the harried undergrad may not be willing to come in and learn about these things. So these questions will guide how much metadata you provide and what level. Archives also come in varied sizes, and thinking about your staff situation will help. Now, I come from a very small institution with only 2 archivists, but I've also been at the state archives with dozens of collection staff. Both come with positives and negatives. You should think about how your staff size and capabilities will impact your research situation. Does your research desk have a rotating shift? Is one person always going to be your constant research contact? On the other side, you need to think about how hard it is to make changes. Do you have autonomy over processing, or do you need to get approval from a supervisor before? How big is the chain, and who needs to be in the room when you're making these decisions? And finally, you want to think about your administrative and technical hurdles. Who is the admin of your instance of ArchiveSpace? And if you aren't an admin, what limitations do you have? Is your instance of ArchiveSpace hosted? And if not, how well can you communicate with your IT department? Can someone on the staff write code or use the ArchiveSpace API to customize your instance? Now, this list is by no means exhaustive, but it creates a starting point to think about how easy or difficult it might be to implement changes and who you need to contact to do so.
So now we will discuss ways that you can help your researchers to understand the ArchiveSpace public user interface. Afterward, we will give a brief demo of some of these tips through the out-of-the-box ArchiveSpace PUI, and then later on, we'll be showing a customized public user interface that features some of these. So the first page users see is your landing page. For the landing page, it would be good to add information here about your institution and what you collect. You can provide links to your library's catalog, digital collections, and give some tips for searching. Here and on other pages, make sure your contact information is easily accessible, such as your phone number and email, so that researchers can reach out to you. And again, with researchers, it will be best to provide them with a primer on archive/archival terminology so that they understand the various terms that appear on the screen, such as finding a collection, series, and file. It's important to give a brief overview of how archives are organized. We at the AUC do this through our instruction sessions, through in-person demos of finding aids, and through the creation of resource guides and video tutorials. It's good to describe to researchers the various entry points for finding materials, such as subjects, names, and digital materials. Explain to them how they can request materials and cite them, such as maybe using the request button and the citation button that are available through the public user interface. You want to show them advanced search options. Let researchers know that ArchiveSpace can be searched like a database, so they can do a Boolean search using and or not, can limit their searches to collections or digital materials, and they can use quotation marks and asterisks. And lastly, be dynamic. The information gathered for the other ways to help researchers can be demonstrated in person, in instruction sessions, through a virtual tour, but you can also create a video tutorial or tutorials that highlight ways in which users can use the ArchiveSpace public user interface. You can create PDF guides that point out important areas for your researchers, and you can use sites like LibGuides to demonstrate important information about finding aids, searching, and browsing. It's important to consider your user/researcher and create tools and resources that help them find the information and materials they need. So now I'm going to do the demo, so I'm going to share that screen. So on the screen, you'll see the sandbox for the current version of ArchiveSpace, and this is the public interface. So this is what you get out of the box when you implement ArchiveSpace. So you can see up here the various tabs, such as repositories, collections, digital material, unprocessed material for your accession, subjects, names for agents, and record groups refer to classifications. So I first want to show you the search box. So this is the general searching that people can just type in a word and hit search. But if they want to do advanced, they can click the add button here and do multiple statements. They can do and, or not. And they can search by just collections or limit to digital material. They can also delete these if they don't want them. And they can change this from keyword to title, creator, subject, notes, and identifier. And they can add years. So in the box, they can search with quotations as well as asterisks, and I want to show that. And it will show you the results for photograph and photographs. So anything that starts with photograph, it will show. And then if you go to a collection, you're also given these buttons up here. You have to turn on the request button if you would like to use it, but there's also citation, which gives you a citation for each record. And they can copy that, and they can print the PDF of this finding aid. And you can go back to the staff side from here. If you're in the tab like subjects, if you click on one of these, it will show you not only the collections, but also the records that have them. So this series that has a subject for correspondence will show in this results. And that is everything I wanted to show there. And we will move on with our presentation. So what can archivists do? The easiest way to help your researchers is to provide the necessary metadata they need to find materials. Notes in ArchiveSpace allow you to describe the materials. Using notes at different levels of your collections will allow those fields to be keyword searchable, so researchers can find them at series or file or item level. Consider using subject terms and agents, not just at the collection level, but at the series, file, and or item level. This will allow researchers to find these records when using the subjects and our names tabs in the public user interface, just as you were just shown. Additionally, another thing archivists can do is to create digital objects. Digital objects provide a link to your digital material. Given the expectations of users and how many of us are working from home and may not have access to our physical materials, more and more collections are being digitized and made available online, or you're relying on your digital collections. So creating digital objects goes beyond just providing a link to the digital collections page on your landing page. It allows you to provide context and link each record associated with a digital object. An example may be correspondence you have in the collection that is digitized on your digital collection site, but has no information about it on your finding aid site. So creating a digital object for this correspondence gives you a way to create a link between them. So digital objects give you an opportunity to provide another way for users to access your digital material. So it's just a way to get more ways for them to have links to click on so they find what they're looking for. And lastly, you can cater your instance of ArchiveSpace towards your researchers and institutions' needs. You can customize your public user interface to fit these needs. I want to point out that there are various integrations and plugins created by ArchiveSpace users that help you to create links between applications such as DSpace, Islandora, Alma, and Aeon, to name a few. If interested in these integrations and plugins, visit the link to resources that we will be providing later on in the presentation.
So we want to talk a little bit about what fields in ArchiveSpace can help. So subject and agent records are a great way for researchers to search across your entire archives for a specific person, institution, or topic. ArchiveSpace lets us use several different standards like the Library of Congress or the Getty Thesaurus. But you can also create a local terminology, which might help if you're working with papers of underserved populations or something that's quite unique to your institution. This can also help when people or institutions use different names at different times, and it'll help keep track of changes, mergers, and more. If your institution is more specific in its collecting, you can also use complex subject records to hone in on specific niches. For instance, instead of just the steel industry, you can find a complex subject record for the steel industry labor disputes in the 20th century in Pennsylvania, which can help researchers who are looking for more specific topics. The notes fields, Brittany already mentioned a little bit. It's another field that you can customize to fit your institution's needs, and the ArchiveSpace public user interface is keyword searchable. So when users search for terms that appear in notes, the collections or records associated with them will appear. So providing notes such as the scope and content and more levels will allow users to find those records. Notes provide description that allowed researchers to better understand the materials and fit their needs. You also have the ability to add links and tags in your notes that can link to other collections or outside resources. Accession records are a great way to provide context for unprocessed collections You can add content description and condition description, but by publishing these records, you can allow researchers to see potential materials for their research. On the public user interface, accession records appear under the tab Unprocessed Materials, letting researchers know that they're not fully available like collections. Institutions can add restrictions explaining how researchers can access these collections or if they're open for research. Making them public help institutions to gather information on the interest for these collections, which can help can determine processing priority. And finally, we've got classifications. Those are under the Record Group tab. Classifications in ArchiveSpace can be used to create or edit a hierarchy of record groups, subgroups, or fonts, as few or as many levels are required by a repository.
Institutions have the ability to customize their ArchiveSpace public user interface to better help their researchers. I will be showing some of the customizations done by the Atlanta University Center. These are just a few of the possible customizations. There are a world of possibilities. So on the screen is the home page for the AUC's Finding Aids website, so our ArchiveSpace instance. You will see at the top here that we have created a banner that features images from some of our collections that have been actually edited and put together in Photoshop, and then it includes our logo. Over here is the name, which includes links back to our ArchiveSpace, our archives homepage, and the Finding Aids link links back to this homepage. You can see that we have limited our tabs. We only have collections, digital materials, subjects, names, and then we've added another one called help. There's currently not much in there. We are working on that as part of our work from home stuff. You'll see that we have more information below the search box. We've added information about the Archives Resource Center, information on what finding aids are under a guide to searching archives. We've added links to our library's catalogs so they can find our rare books, and links to our digital collections page. We've also provided contact information such as our email and phone number so they can schedule an appointment and ask us questions. Over here is a carousel of images from our collections. This is one of the few plugins we use. So we call it the carousel plugin. We use it on our staff side and we just add images from our collections and people can scroll through it and they can send us questions about it. Currently, they can't click on these to get to the digital materials. If you go to a collection, you will see that we have citation, request, and print as options. If they click on the request button, they will be given this request box. This is not the out-of-the-box request box. The typical one just has name, email address, anticipated arrival date, and note to staff. We have required arrival time since we have very specific time. We've also told them how to fill out this form up top and provided information on our general hours at the bottom and ways to contact us if they have questions about scheduling an appointment or requesting materials. And if they request materials, it goes through a reCAPTCHA. So we use reCAPTCHA to verify that it's a real person because we have gotten a lot of spam through the request button. So the reCAPTCHA allows us to limit that and pretty much altogether get rid of any spam emails being sent to our email address for requests and appointments. And that is pretty much all that we've done to customize ours. We are looking into further customizations, but that's what we did when we first started using the public user interface. So now we will discuss analytics. To better help your researchers and to provide the best reference through ArchiveSpace, it is important to understand how your researchers are using ArchiveSpace. Ways to do this include analyzing site data, such as site visits and most visited pages through using applications like Google Analytics. You can create assessments on your site to ask users how they're using it, what they like, don't like, what is confusing / hard to understand, and ask for suggestions for what would help them better use the site. It's important to gather feedback from your several types of researchers who have varying levels of experience. and use this feedback to customize and/or create resources that will help researchers use the site and find materials. Forms of assessments include surveys. These surveys can be solely on your public user interface and how researchers are using it, or on your reference practices overall. So you can include questions about ArchiveSpace with questions about your reading room practices. They will allow you to ask questions on users' experiences after they have visited your institution. Another form of assessment is user/usability studies. Conducting user studies, such as focus groups with your various users, allows you to gather feedback in real time. They can help you decide whether or not to use the public user interface and/or how to improve it. At the AUC, we conducted a user study to determine whether or not we should use the ArchiveSpace public user interface. We used a combination of a focus group and survey to have attendees answer questions and give observations. Their observations and answers allowed us to make an informed decision and customize our instance for our users. Overall, it is worth it to gather the necessary data that will help you better provide access to your collections through your ArchiveSpace instance.
So we've created a Google folder with some resources that might help you get you started on this. It includes documentations and training on ArchiveSpace, about altering the public user interface, and some examples of how institutions are using ArchiveSpace have made access easier to the researchers. Some of these include even a primer on archives as a whole, as well as how to navigate the ArchiveSpace public user interface like Brittany showed us today. Feel free to explore and share these resources. We'll make sure that they are available in perpetuity. So at that point, we're ready to look at some questions. Looks like a couple people were commenting about that the PDFs on finding aids aren't very pretty. Is there a way to fix this feature for in-house purposes? And if the researcher wants to print the PDF? And then someone else followed up that they agreed that the older ArchiveSpace finding aids were much prettier and shorter. Do you have any comments on that, Brittany?
So I will say that the PUI PDF is different from the staff side, and it also depends on which version of ArchiveSpace you're currently using, because they have worked on it. But you may also want to look into how Yale has done their PDFs, because they create PDFs based on EAD and then upload those overnight into their ArchiveSpace instance on the public side. And it looks slightly different.
All right, Carolyn asked, is there a way to ensure the patron understands the extent of what they're requesting? Can they accidentally request an entire collection with numerous boxes? How can that be clarified? That's a great question. And I think that has to go with sort of doing things ahead of time. If we kind of teach people how the ArchiveSpace public user interface works, it might help them to understand when they open up something and it says like, you know, the extent is 200 linear feet and they're hitting, oh yeah, I'd like to see that they understand what they're fully getting themselves into. So I think this is one of those things where teaching people a little bit ahead of time is helpful, but we all know there's people who kind of just do a Google search or they accidentally stumble into our ArchiveSpace interface and don't fully understand what they're getting themselves into. Do you have any ideas, Brittany?
So we have had that issue. We actually provide container instance information at the collection level. So they know if they request a whole collection, they're asking for 100, 200 boxes. And there may be a way for you to customize it and have it just to where they can request at a file record or series record, so they're not requesting all boxes. We haven't done that yet, but we have created a video tutorial about requesting materials that will be made public hopefully soon, that tells them to only request so many items through the request button, and if they ask for 10 or more, they need to email us with all that they want rather than use the request button. And we tell them not to request at collection levels.
Ashlyn said that they found the public user interface very confusing to researchers. Where can we go to find out timelines for changes that ArchiveSpace is making to the public user interface? So that's going to be with the changes in what version of ArchiveSpace that you're using. And that's kind of, that thought is exactly what prompted this entire session, because I was having a problem at my institution that people were having a trouble understanding the public user interface. But I think that's where the customizations really come in handy, that if you can see that people are making the same complaints over and over again about the public user interface, that, you know, just finding out what those are, making sure that it's documented, and then using that to make customizations would help.
Yes, and ArchiveSpace has a roadmap for development. I'm not sure where the PUI fits into that, but it's always something you can reach out to them about.
We're back on PDFs being ugly. People are discussing how they're altering the PDFs to make them prettier.
Yes, I know of Purdue using the external links/document section and providing PDFs through that. And it's a way for you to create your own PDFs rather than using ArchiveSpace ones.
And then Jennifer had asked specifically to you, Brittany, when do you anticipate your video for requests being finished?
Well, I will have it recorded this week, but it depends on when I get it edited, when it will be finished. But I'm hoping to make it available either this month or next month.
It looks like we have 3 minutes left. So if anybody else has additional questions. Jessica, you have anything you want to chime in on?
Yeah, thank you guys for moderating your own Q&A. I really enjoyed this. I did.
You needed a break. You needed a break.
This is going great. I did drop a link to the development roadmap into the chat for everyone, since you referenced that earlier.
Yeah, and I would say look at the Google Drive folder. There's a lot of great resources there, and there are links to LibGuides that have videos. So I would definitely check out those videos, tutorials. They sound great and they look great to me. So.
Yeah, there's lots of little differences that people can make just even to their landing page, that make tiny tweaks that can really make ArchiveSpace that much more functional to a researcher who doesn't know what they're getting themselves into. So even if you don't have the greatest capabilities for coding or for using the API or anything like that, you can do little things here and there that really will help propel your researchers to the next level. Oh, we do have a question. Margaret asked, have you done any customization on masking data in bulk? For example, is there a consistent piece of data in a single field that you want to display differently to an end user?
I have not done that. You may want to check out Yale's public user interface, because they changed what certain things appear in the, like, it's not collection organization as a tab, it's finding aid view for them. And they changed what the PDF button says. So you may want to look at that, but I'm not certain if there's any other customizations on that. I just wanted to point out that the quick reference guide that I provided was created in a Word document. You can do Photoshop, but it's easy to create in a Word document. And it's mainly based on things that are confusing to our users, like the request button, like what do you need to use and how to search. So that's an easier way to help people who find the PUI confusing, is just by creating those resource guides.
All right, well, that's time for us. Thank you guys so much for listening. We were really excited to present to you on this topic.